Well, this week was big on horrors, so that's fun. What's up, nerds? Back again with another week in review video. Missed last week, but that was because there was an issue with the audio, as in I forgot to record the audio, and I didn't feel like re-recording everything, so that's why I missed last week. But back this week with a lot of horror this week, so that's fun. And so let's get started with short films. This week I watched 6 short films. Of those 6, 3 of them were horror. And my favorite one of the week was horror. My favorite short film of the week this week was Curve. My least favorite short film of the week was not horror. It's Skin. So, Curve. Curve was a fun short. It's a very simple short. It's about this girl who somehow finds herself stuck on this curved ledge that leads into this giant abyss. Letterboxd described the abyss as sentient, which made me think that the abyss was going to talk to her. It doesn't. It just makes some spooky sounds, and that's it. That's the extent of its sentient, it seems. But apart from that, it's also clearly supernatural in some way because you can see there are other ledges, and these other ledges have also blood trails on them, but they don't seem to have people on them. But we see the blood trails moving around as if people are on them, falling, and we hear sounds coming from the other ledges of people falling to their deaths. So it's a very simple short. In fact, there's no dialogue. There are no other characters. It's just this girl trying to climb out of the abyss. And for what it is, for that simplicity, it's actually incredibly impressive. First of all, the sound design is superb. The sound design is absolutely phenomenal. Very crisp and clear. So that way you can hear every little scrape on the ledge as she tries to climb out. So it's very crisp and clear, which helps build the anxiety of it. And that's the other thing. The short overall is just so anxiety inducing. It is so tense and anxious seeing this girl constantly trying to climb out of this abyss only to constantly keep sliding back nearly to her death. It's this constant struggle to survive even though it's very, very clear there is no escape. There's no hope of survival. It is grim and harrowing and so, it's so tense and nerve-wracking. But she keeps going. She keeps constantly trying to survive. And so in reality, I've seen different interpretations of this short. The main thing is that a lot of people seem to think that this is about depression, and I can definitely see it. I can definitely see how this is about depression. This constant struggle to climb out, even though there seems to be no hope, no escape of it. But the thing is that, because of that, some people have said that it's a very depressing short, because of the fact that it seems like she dies at the end. But also some people have said that it's also very hopeful. It's very optimistic, because even though there's no escape, and even though she might die at the end, she's still constantly struggling to survive. She's still constantly trying. And so it's about human endurance. And whichever way you want to look at it, it's still impressive, and it's even more impressive how much room there is for interpretation in such a short. It's only a few minutes long, but in those few minutes you get so much from it. And there's, like I said, it's very simple. There's no dialogue, no other characters, nothing. It's just this struggle to survive. But this struggle to survive is impressive. and it builds everything you need from it. So there's not much to it, but there really doesn't need to be much to it. It's short, sweet, and simple, and powerful. In that simplicity, it is fantastic. So, favorite short of the week? Curve. As for my least favorite short of the week, Skin. The exact opposite of Curve. Not simple at all. It's complicated and messy, and it tries to be nuanced and layered, but it just comes across as pretentious and convoluted. It's not short. It's like 20 minutes. And it's not layered. It's like such a mess. Where Curve keeps its themes very simple and allows for interpretation within its simplicity, this is very clear cut what it's trying to be about. And I do say trying because it fails constantly. Totally, horribly fails. This is short about this white guy, this white neo-Nazi, who, after an encounter with a black man in a grocery store where he nearly beats the black guy to death with some of his other neo-Nazi friends, gets kidnapped by friends of the black guy, who then tattoo his whole body black, and then he goes home and gets shot by his son. And it's so remarkable how much wrong there is to this short. It's impressive how every single story beat is a failure. Be it because it's stereotypical and just so cliched and boring, or be it because it's so remarkably unrealistic in its portrayal of racial dynamics and so absurd in its portrayal, or be it simply because it completely fails to sell the point that it's trying to sell. The film is clearly trying to be about racism, but not just racism. It's trying to be about this cycle of violence and this cycle of racism and hatred. And in doing so, it takes both sides' viewpoint. It tries to sympathize with both sides. With the black guys getting beat up, and with the neo-Nazis doing the beating up. And it like dangerously equates the two actions. The actions of the neo-Nazi hatefully beating up a black guy, and the actions of black men getting their justice. It equates the two. And they're not the same at all, but it tries to equate the two. Somehow, this short about that's supposed to be against racism ends with the neo-Nazi being the victim of a hate crime. It's almost laughably bad how they manage that. Like, there aren't roving mobs of black men roaming the streets to beat up neo-Nazis. That doesn't happen. There are neo-Nazis beating up black men in America. But those neo-Nazis don't get kidnapped by black men and beat up. So its attempts to portray the racial dynamics in America as being equal in their hatred is wrong and unrealistic. It doesn't happen. It tries to showcase how children inherit the hatred their parents have. But that's wrong, too. Because the black kid, Brony, he hates Jeffrey, who's the white father, the white neo-Nazi. He hates Jeffrey because Jeffrey beat up his dad. Which is fair. That's understandable. It's not equal to Jeffrey hating black men for being black. Bronny just hates Jeffrey because he beat up his dad. That is very clear from the way Bronny looks at him. And then Troy, who is the little white kid, doesn't seem to actually hate black people. The only time he takes any kind of action against a black person is when he shoots his father, which is understandable because men kidnapped his father, and then it seems like one of them broke into his house. So that's understandable that he would then shoot the man supposedly threatening his mother. It's not that he hates black people. In fact, he's even friendly to JD, who is the black father. Like, he's smiling and laughing with JD.
Thank you.
So, trying to have it be about this cycle of hatred doesn't work because the hatred doesn't seem to actually be inherited. It's just Jeffrey. Jeffrey is the only bad guy in this short. And him and his neo-Nazi friends. But Troy doesn't hate black people. JD gets beat up, and we don't see enough of him to even see how he feels about white people. But he's smiling and playing, like joking around with a white kid, so he clearly doesn't hate white people. Bronny doesn't seem to hate white people. The only hateful one here is Jeffrey, and he's the one that's made into a victim at the end. So what is this short supposed to be about? What is the point of this? I also find it funny that for a short about racism, it relegates the black characters to pretty much non-speaking roles. Like, JD gets like 2 lines.
He was looking at the toy.
What? I'm sorry, I can't hear you. What did you say?
He was looking at the toy.
Do we have a fucking problem, nigga?
What? Huh? You know what?
What was that?
You're my fucking problem.
Bronny's lines are just him pleading with the neo-Nazis to stop beating up his dad. I don't remember the mother's name, the black mother's name, but she's also the same.
Dad! 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 Oh my God! Dad!
None of his friends say anything really. So the only characters that talk are the neo-Nazis. And then when the black characters do show up on screen, they're shot menacingly. The way they're framed, in constant shadows, looming over the other characters, they're framed as vigilantes. They're shot in ways that's meant to make them look menacing. So this short film that's supposed to be about racism villainizes its black characters, sympathizes with the neo-Nazis, uses blackface as its climax, and then tries to take a both sides approach by the end of it all. And it somehow won the Oscar for Best Live Action Short. It's almost a parody, really. So, that was my favorite short film of the week, my least favorite short film of the week. Now, for feature films. This week I watched 11 feature films, and of those 11, 5 of them were horror. Like I said, this was a big week for horror for me, for some reason. I don't know why that ended up happening. Just sorta did. It was a good week, though. And so of those 11, my favorite film of the week is not a horror week. It's not a horror film. Though some of them got close. My favorite film of the week is Whiplash, which I just saw for the first time and absolutely blew me away. And my least favorite film of the week, The Babadook, which is a horror film. Funny how that works. My favorite short film was a horror, and my least favorite feature film was a horror. Fun balance there. Anyways, Whiplash.
I'm sorry.
No, stay. What's your name?
Andrew Naaman, sir.
What year are you?
I'm first year.
You know who I am?
Yes, sir.
So you know I'm looking for players.
Yes, sir.
Then why did you stop playing?
Now, Whiplash is a movie that I had heard a lot about, and it's in the top, 50 of Letterboxd's top 250 films list. It's, way up there. And I had heard a lot about this film. A lot. So it's, one of the most popular films that's been on my watch list for a long time. I think it's, the second most popular film on my watch list. It's not on my watch list anymore, but it was on my watch list. And I'll be honest, I didn't think it could live up to the hype. I really didn't. It sounds kind of basic. The premise is pretty basic. It's a similar premise to a lot of films you've seen. It's about this music student who's going to this music school for jazz to be a drummer. And he gets discovered by the conductor of the main band of the school, which is one of the best bands in the country. And the film follows his attempts to rise to the top, even as his teacher is abusive and relentless. And that's kind of a basic premise. It's very similar to a lot of films about ambitious young people trying to make it in a field. There's nothing groundbreaking about the premise. And so I wasn't sure if it was going to be good. I thought it would be kind of bland. Well, not bland. Maybe it would be good, but I didn't think it would be anything unique. And then I started watching it, and almost immediately, it is one of the most intense and anxiety-inducing films I've ever seen. It's 100 minutes long, and for 100 minutes, it is just constant, pure intensity. This, fanatical drive and ambition to the most unhealthy degree possible. It is relentless and just sheer captivating fury. Constantly gripping. It's astounding how intense this film is. And part of the intensity comes from the performances. The main characters are Andrew Naaman, who is played by Miles Teller, and he's the student. And Teller is he's really good in this film. He managed to bring a lot of that ambition out really well. That constant drive. Every scene he's in, it's clear what his mind is focusing on. And it's clear how much passion he has. His passion for drumming really comes through in every scene when he talks about drumming. But of course, the real intensity comes from Terrence Fletcher, the teacher, who is played by J.K. Simmons in a performance that was 100% deserving of the Oscar that it won. Now, I've always thought Simmons is a good actor. I've seen him in some films. I haven't seen too many of his movies. I've seen him in, the Spider-Man series, where he's great, or Palm Springs, where he's great. And he's done a lot of voice work in films and shows that I love, like Claws, Gravity Falls, which is one of my favorite shows ever, Legend of Korra, another really great show. And so I've always thought he's a really good actor. He's not. He is phenomenal. In this film, he is phenomenal. He brings out Terrence so perfectly, so intensely and powerfully, and terrifyingly. But it's also very layered and nuanced, because you can tell that a lot of his fury and drive, to an extent, is a show. Like, you can see it in a lot of his quieter moments, that there's more to him than just this constant drive to push his students. You can see that it's clear that he's doing this because he truly believes that this is what it takes to make it.
Any fucking moron can wave his arms and keep people in tempo. I was there to push people beyond what's expected of them. I believe that is an absolute necessity. Otherwise, we're depriving the world of the next Louis Armstrong, the next Charlie Parker.
It's not that he's just like this as a person. Like, he has a lot of moments where he's very calm and composed and very, like, well put together. We see that when he's, like, interacting with the little girl before one of the shows. We see that when he kind of has a bit of a breakdown and starts crying when he hears that one of his students has just died. We see that even, like, during the first rehearsal that Andrew goes to, he's very composed and understanding at first. It's not until Andrew continues to fail that the mask slips and he starts throwing chairs around.
Not quite my tempo. It's all good. No worries. Here we go. 6, 7.
And so he's a very nuanced character. And that nuance, Teller works off of it incredibly well. The two are constantly pushing each other. It's this constant, like, butting of heads. And it's so astounding how well they work together. And what really makes this so great, though, is that it would have been very easy to shoot this film and make it that way. Andrew is a hero by the end, and he succeeds, and he gets everything he wants. Or to even have it be about an artist who couldn't make it, and have it be a tragedy. But it's not about that. The tragedy is that he does make it. The tragedy is that he lets Terrence's ideology infect him. And so by the end, he gives everything over to this performance by the end. And when we see him on stage performing in front of that huge crowd, and he's taking control of the performance, doing his solo, finally getting understanding and recognition from Terrence, it's not a victory. When he wins the court chair halfway through the movie, after a grueling 5-hour session, it's not a victory. None of these moments are ever victories. When we see him, like, crawling out of the car wreckage that he just got into and going on stage and being told it's too late, the tragedy isn't that he can't play. The tragedy is that he tried to make it anyways. His drive is never idolized. It is shown to be toxic and dangerous. When he's during that 5-hour session, the focus isn't even on how well he's doing. The focus is on how his hands are bleeding over the drums. How his hands are scarring and constantly bleeding because of this. Constantly playing madly until his hands are bleeding and bleeding and bleeding time and time again. It's not triumphant. When we see him at the very end, the camera pans over to his father, and the father is watching, concerned. Not happy that his son has made it. concerned that his son is doing this at the cost of everything else in his life. He's like completely devoted to this mad quest to the top, and it's at the expense of everything else. Any friends he has, his family, his relationship, even his own school by the end, everything. He's giving it all up for this mad quest. And everything works to build towards that. The performances which are fully devoted to the madness. The like quick-paced, rapid-fire editing, which even manages to make playing jazz music seem tense and gripping. For like the intense close-ups on the eyes as they're just like staring into each other with wide eyes. It's so intense and focused and nerve-wracking every single moment of this film. It is one of the most nerve-wracking films I have ever seen because of how perfectly it manages to capture that intensity. So, honestly, by the end, the film has lived up to the hype. It is genuinely... I love Birdman, but this is the film that should have won Best Picture. Because as great as Birdman is, this film is just so intense and memorable. As for my least favorite film of the week, The Babadook. This is another film I was really looking forward to this week because I'd heard so much about this movie, and I'd heard it's like one of the best horror films ever made. William Friedkin, the director of The Exorcist, which is one of my favorite horror films of all time, it's in the top 25, he said of this movie that it's basically on the same level as Psycho and Alien, two other films that are in my top 100 horror films of all time. And so, for this man, such an esteemed director, to come out and declare this horror film one of the best ever made, I was excited about this movie. And I was also really excited, especially recently, because I had recently seen another movie, Before I Wake, which is sort of about a similar topic. It's about this parent-child dynamic as it's strained by grief, and how that's explored. And I loved Before I Wake. It's also one of my favorite horror films of all time. And so to have this film, The Babadook, which explores a lot of the same ground as Before I Wake, and to have it be so heavily praised constantly everywhere I see, I was excited. And then the film begins. The film is so bitter. It's a bitter and sour movie. That's the best way to describe it. This movie is bitter and sour. And so this film is about this mother. Her name is Amelia, and she's played by Essie Davis. And to be fair to Essie Davis, Davis gives a pretty solid performance. She's like really good as Amelia. And so Amelia is a single mother. Her husband died driving her to the hospital to have her child, Samuel, who's played by Noah Wiseman. Wiseman does a phenomenal job in the role, and he honestly, I think the actor was better than the character here. And the problem is So it's about this mother trying. So it's about Amelia as she tries to raise Samuel while they're being haunted by this creature called the Babadook. And the film is ultimately about grief. You know, both of them are grieving over the death of Oscar, who is the husband slash father here. And neither one has processed it properly, mostly because Amelia refuses to try to process it. She's pushed it out of her mind. She doesn't want to talk about it. And because of that, Samuel can't process it. And so the film is about grief. And it's also about the struggles of being a mother, especially being a single mother. That's what this movie is about. Fine. That's great. The problem is that this film feels like it's bitter about motherhood. The film feels like it doesn't like motherhood. It demonizes children. All children in this film act like brats.
You're not even good enough to have a dad. Everyone else has one, you don't.
None more so than Samuel, who the film goes out of its way to portray as screechy and obnoxious.
Just be normal! There is no Babadook!
But at the same time, gives him a lot of traits of autistic children. There are a lot of people who have watched this movie and looked at Samuel and said, yeah, he's probably autistic. And so a lot of parents of autistic children have related to Amelia. The struggles of trying to raise an autistic child. Fine, yes. That is difficult. Speaking as someone with autism, yeah, it can be difficult. But the problem is, the film has no sympathy for Samuel. Samuel is demonized for most of the movie. There are only a few instances where there's any sympathy for him. The focus is constantly on Amelia. When Samuel is trying to show her his magic tricks, being a kid with a hyperfixation, now with an interest, she ignores him. And instead of portraying that as being neglectful and focusing on how Samuel must feel in that moment, it focuses on how frazzled Amelia is in that moment.
Nothing in my hands, nothing in my hands.
Stand still, please.
Look at me, Mom.
Come on, Samuel.
Look at me.
Stand still, please.
Nothing in my hands, nothing in my
I
hands.
don't want you making weapons anymore.
It doesn't work if you don't look at me.
This monster thing has got to stop, all right?
The focus isn't on Samuel, who is being ignored. The focus is on Amelia, who is being inconvenienced. And that's constantly the case. All of Amelia's problems constantly go back to Samuel. Claire, her sister, doesn't want to spend time with her because she doesn't want to be around Samuel.
I want to know how you are.
You don't come around to our house anymore?
Because I can't stand being around your son.
I can't believe you just said that.
Amelia has to take off from work because Samuel can't behave at school. Fine, these are genuine problems, yes, but to have that constantly be the problem, to have it be, and to never give us any moment where it's shown that the reason why all of this is happening is because of the way Amelia treats Samuel, it ignores everything Samuel is going through. And so it demonizes this child with a mental divergence for the sake of focusing on the mother who is neglectful and abusive towards him. And the film tries to win sympathy for Amelia because it shows how her friends treat her. Like, especially during that one party scene where the friends are talking about her and just completely, glossing over everything she says. It shows how she defends her son against other people, like when the principal and the counselor are talking about Samuel as the boy, and she's like, don't call him the boy. And it tries to sympathize with her with the way it constantly frames her as tired and frazzled. So the film tries to make her a sympathetic character. She's not. The film creates this character who should have never been a mother. Because it's clear that her focus in life isn't Samuel, it's everything else. She's bitter about everything Samuel takes away from her, supposedly. And like, if that's the attitude you have about your child, you shouldn't be a parent. There's a difference between being upset that you can't do a lot of the same things you used to do, which is reasonable, and threatening your son with a knife for being concerned and scared.
I said the Babadook.
The Babadook isn't real, Samuel. It's just something you've made up in your stupid little head.
I just didn't want you to let it in.
And for calling him stupid and insulting him constantly. There are differences. Like, it's an extreme here. If she were more toned down, that would be one thing. If it was clear that a lot of this was because of the Babadook, that would be one thing. But a lot of this happens when she's not possessed. A lot of this happens when she's just herself. She blames Samuel for her mental health, for her husband's death, for her isolation, for everything. And I hate films like this that portray parenthood as this horrible thing. If you think parenthood is this horrible thing, don't be a parent. And it's clear from this film that Amelia should not have been a parent. And the film never addresses any of this. It never gives her any kind of redemption. Because it never even shows that it's her fault. It tries to blame her grief, which again, the film blames on Samuel. It tries to blame the Babadook. It tries to blame everything but Amelia. Amelia is purely and solely at fault for the way she treats Samuel, and the film never addresses that. And so, it just leaves a sour taste in my mouth to see how this poor kid is being treated by his own mother. The poor kid is being abused and beaten and neglected. And the film goes out of its way to absolve her of all guilt. How is that good? How is this a good movie? Like, how is this a good portrayal of parenthood? I am concerned for everyone who watched this movie and said, yes, this is what it feels like to be a parent. Don't be a parent. Please, for the sake of your children, don't be a parent.
It's all right. It's all right. It's all right.
So, that was my favorite movie of the week. My least favorite movie of the week. Whiplash, 4.5 out of 5. The Babadook, 2 out of 5. Mostly because the performances are really good. Everything else is terrible. So, Pabu, what was your favorite movie of the week? Oculus.
Here it is. Here it is.
Very fair. Pabu and I are Mike Flanagan fans, so that's fair. Pabu is also very sleepy. Alright, Pabu, go back to sleep. Say goodbye. Bye-bye.